Hello and welcome everyone. In this video, we are going to have a look at the Queen's Gambit trap. The main trap in the Queen's Gambit, how you can do it with the white as well as with the black color. Also, we are going to have a look at three unknown ways or three unknown traps, how you can get into this position. So let's get started. The Queen's Gambit starts with d4. He plays his pawn to d5 and we play our pawn to c4, trying to attack in the center. If he accepts the gambit by capturing this, then we can go with a pawn to e3 and give an attack to this pawn on c4. If he tries to hold up this, the main trap here, he plays his pawn to b5, then we immediately go with a pawn to a4. He definitely cannot play his pawn to a6 because after capture, he's gonna lose the rook. Here, what if instead of playing the pawn to a6, he plays his pawn to c6? Well, if he plays his pawn to c6, then also you capture, he capture back, and you play your queen to f3, aiming at the rook. You are going to win the rook. Now, quickly, let's have a look. What if we want to do it from the black side? So, after he plays his pawn to d4, you do not immediately go with the pawn to d5. Instead, you play your pawn to c5. If he accepts that gambit and captures the pawn on the c5 square, then you go pawn e6, attacking that pawn. He defends it in the same manner how black was doing earlier. He plays his pawn to b4, then you give an attack and play your pawn to a5. Here, if he defends it with his pawn to a3, we have already seen he's going to lose the rook because your rook is going to aim at his. But if he defends it with his pawn to c3, then you can just capture back and the queen goes to f6, aiming at the rook again. Quickly, let's see what if he's not playing his pawn to c3 and instead he's just playing his pawn to a5 square. Then both of these pawns are weak. You are going to capture them one by one. First, start with capturing this one, give a check, and then later you can aim for this pawn too. So see how this main trap can be converted from the black side as well. Now there are few unknown ways of how we can really get these traps. You don't need to start it from pawn d4, but sometimes you can also initiate the position by playing your knight to f3. Now since the knight has been played to the f3 square, then these developing a pawn to e5 looks a little risky. The opponent won't want to do that. So he can start with the pawn to d5. When he plays his pawn to d5, instead of playing your pawn to d4 and starting the trap, you have started it with knight to f3. Now you can go with your pawn to c4. Here there are two choices he can do. Either he's gonna capture your pawn on the c4 square, or he's gonna push the pawn up on d4. We are going to have a look at both of these variations. First, let's see what if he captures your pawn on the c4 square. Then we go with the same idea. This time we play our pawn to e3. The bishop gives an attack to this pawn. Correct. If he wants to hold up on that pawn with the same idea that he places pawn to b5, this time there's a little change. Even you cannot go with your if you play a pawn to a4, he defends it, capture. You cannot really go with your queen to f3, right? That's the difference. But that's not going to stop us at all. We are going to go with the same plan. How? Play a pawn to a4. He places pawn to c6, defending the pawn. Now here you go with your knight to f3 first, trying to give an attack to this pawn on b5. Definitely he cannot protect it by playing his pawn to a6 because you are simply going to capture it. This pawn is pinned to the rook. He cannot move that. So what is the other way to hold on that pawn? So he can, a most natural move looks here is play the bishop to d7, right? But sometimes player may also play the knight to f6, just giving away that pawn for free. Let's say here he plays his bishop to d7. If he plays his bishop to d7, then you go and give an attack to this bishop. This you can play your knight to e5 here. Right, on the next move you are going to win this game. You're definitely going to go queen f3. Queen f3 is not only going to attack the rook on the a8 square, but also the pawn on the f7 square. It will result to a checkmate. Now what do you think what your opponent can do here? Okay, if he plays a random move like pawn e6, then definitely queen e3 wins the game. But if he plays a good looking move like a natural move which defends the pawn on the f7 square, playing his knight to f6, then also you go queen f3. How is he going to save the rook? By blocking it with the knight, but then thanks to your knight on the e5 square, you capture his knight, the bishop captures it, you capture the bishop, it's a check. If he blocks it with his knight, then you are going to win the pawn on the c5 square. Next, your targeting is to go on the c7 square with the knight, give a check and win the rook. He can give you an attack by playing his rook to c8 square, while then you can come back with your queen to e4. Now, this pawn is in danger, the pawn on a7. If he tries to defend it just by moving the pawn to a6 or pawn a5 anywhere, then it's a complete winning position for you. It is a checkmate in one move, knight d6, a beautiful smothered checkmate. He cannot capture it over here because the pawn is pinned, right? Okay, so this was one way when he has captured your pawn on the c4 square. After playing the knight to f3, pawn d5, pawn c4. Now let's quickly have a look. What if he is not capturing your pawn? What if he's pushing instead? So here if he plays his pawn to d4, then also you just play your pawn to e3. Offer him a trade-off pawn. Here, if he captures, then it is nothing better than you, because now look at this pawns. They are completely, look at these pieces, they are completely blocked. It looks like the pawn has traveled so much just to get exchanged here. Well, at looking at the white's position, you will see that this pawn is developed, this is developed. Next move, you are going to play your bishop. The pawn is going to come up, and all your pieces are well developed. So you are much, much, much more ahead in the development. Correct? Okay, if he captures, then it is all good for you. But many of the players won't capture here. Instead, they are going to play their pawn to c5. And if they play their pawn to c5 square, then you can start by pushing the pawn to b4, attack that c5 pawn. If he captures your b4 pawn, then both the pawns are gone. But if he tries to hold upon that pawn by playing his pawn to b6, that is the time that we exchange and now go with your knight to e5. Keeping the idea similar, that you want to play your queen to f3 and attack with this one over here. Okay, if the player is really smart, if he is an advanced level player, he'll understand queen f3 is the move. If he plays his bishop there on the b7 square, okay, knight f6, everything we have seen earlier, what happens if he plays his knight to f6, you're going to play a queen to f3. But if he plays his bishop to b7 square, now queen is not going to come to the f3 square, right? So what to do in that case? Shift your plan, change your plan and go it completely on the queen side. You can play our queen to a4 and give a check. He's gonna defend it with his knight. So let's say he gets his knight to d7 square. Then you can exchange the pawns over here and just push your pawn to c5. Next idea is to promote it over here. Not only that, if he tries to defend that square just by attacking your knight, then you first exchange the knight and now you can go with your bishop to b5, pinning this queen. You're not only going to win the queen there, but this will be a check and you win the bishop too. So overall, these were the three unknown traps, that how you can start by playing your knight to f3 first, then play a pawn to c4, and from the black side you can play a pawn to c5 directly, then go with your plan of a5 and give an attack. This is that trap in the Queen's Gambit that 100% you can win. This is a must-know trap in the Queen's Gambit. I hope you enjoyed the content, and if you are liking our videos, then please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, share it with your chess friends. Thank you.